What I'm going to do is a little different. I'm going to give you a quick whirlwind tour of what's going on in this clean tech and what now is increasingly called resource revolution, resource efficiency revolution, how it's changing how we do things, how it's changing the global economy, and reshaping the world we live in. But I want this to be a little different. I'm going to challenge you to ask any questions you want. Raise your hand anytime. I want this to be as provocative, as interactive as humanly possible. So have at it. Any questions? Don't need to wait at the end. I want this to be fun. So let me start here. For the last 2 days, you've heard a lot about solar, wind, sustainability, and I'm here to tell you it's all coming, and it's coming faster than people have told you. But I want to tell you there's the other half of the equation, which is just as big, if not bigger, and that is the resource efficiency part. The way throughout which we learn how to use everything we touch more efficiently than ever before, starting with cars. Because most of you know the average car in the United States sits idle 97% of the time. This is going to bring forth a tidal wave and change in the mobility industry, and we'll come back to that. But there are three things that are going to affect every part of your life. New technologies like the Internet of Things, big data, and I'll talk about how these two new technologies are changing everything. And again, I just flew in from Silicon Valley this morning. Overlaid with new business models, things like the sharing economy that are literally changing the way global capitalism is being run. So let me start here. Nothing has changed the global economy more than the Apple iPhone and the revolution in smartphones. I was just talking to someone, they did their honeymoon 30 years ago, and they went back to see the Maasai warriors again, and I said, my God, how was it? And he said, it was incredible. It was just like when we got married, except now they're standing out in the savannah holding their smartphones. This changes everything. And with this Internet of Things phenomenon, we will all be living in a world where not just your iPhone, but every appliance, your car, every facet of your home, work, and everything in between will be on the Internet. All of it capturing data. This is scary. It casts implications with it, but it is reshaping the global economy. And it's moving into your home faster than you know. Since the ULI's here, I want to do a full stop on this. I served on the Secretary of Energy's National Advisory Board. I was one of 8 people. I represented the venture capital industry, and Secretary of Energy Chu asked me to put together the white paper on building energy efficiency because he said that will have a more profound impact on reducing the nation's energy use than all the solar or wind we will build. And you at the ULI are sitting on the edge of that revolution. The world's biggest companies are all moving into the home. They're getting, for the first time, in between the utilities and the homeowner, one, to capture the revenue, but also to capture the data on every facet of what you're doing. Will this bring extraordinary energy efficiency to your life? Absolutely. Will it make your life a lot easier? Without a doubt. Will it create some truly enormous privacy issues? You bet. This is the new world we live in. This is why these 3 companies, all in the top 10 biggest firms in the world, are in a breakneck race to come into your home. Big data. Just as big a phenomenon, because not only will there be data on every part of your life, we'll be able to crunch it, to make sense out of it, to give you advice, to make your life easier, and to sell you more stuff. And no place will the big data phenomenon be bigger or more profound in how we drive cars. I think many of you know virtually every major automaker in the world is putting an all-electric vehicle on the road this year. But folks, right behind it, and when I say right behind, I mean 12 to 24 months. We're not measuring in years anymore, in months. You will see autonomous vehicles. So how quickly? Ford The laggard in this space, don't quote me on this, but the laggard in this space, the president of Ford has said by 2021, 4 years from now, they will be putting cars on the road without steering wheels, brakes, or accelerators. That's Ford. Tesla is 2 years ahead of them. Most everybody else is in between. That changes everything, and it's all because of big data, which will make cars safer than they've ever been before. It will drop the cost of transporting people and goods dramatically. The needs for public parking structures go away. And on top of it all, for those of you who are just a little bit familiar with traffic in Southern California, McKinsey estimates you can get, does anybody want to take a guess how many more cars McKinsey says you can put on the road with autonomous vehicles when they're driven by machines, not people? 10x. They said 8x. So I just want you to know, this is not a 5, 10, 15% improvement. You can literally put 8x the number of vehicles on the road there are today and end up with less traffic. Overlay with that, completely new business models like the sharing economy. Cover story, Time magazine, and I was thinking, I get it. I live in Silicon Valley. I understand sharing economy companies. How many are there? 100, 200? There's 100,000. And that was 2 years ago. Now estimated to be between 500,000 plus. This is changing our life. And let me just, whoops. Didn't want to spoil things, folks. I just want to take a minute on Hilton. My entire life, if you've done okay, maybe you'd get to go stay in a Hilton hotel. It was a big deal. And why not? Hilton had hotels in 2,300 cities. It was around the world, an American standard of a company that had done well and gone global. 8 years ago, Airbnb comes out, and they're in 25,000 cities. Hilton subs out or rents out 700,000 rooms every night. It's great. Airbnb, close to 1.5 million and doubling every 18 months in 25,000 cities around the world. That is how quickly it is changing the global economy. So having given you that bird's eye view into what's coming, how quickly, and some of the dangers like privacy, the Clinton campaign is aware of some of those privacy issues. We can all use some more cybersecurity. We have to deal with this. And the question comes up, how will the Trump administration change this whole move towards sustainability, resource efficiency? What does this mean? And what I want to suggest to you, when it comes to energy policy, not much. And the surprising reason for that is most of the action in energy, most of the energy policy, and I've worked at the Federal Department of Energy as well as for the State Public Utilities Commission, most of this nation's energy policy is dictated at the state level. The PUC has far more impact than most agencies in Washington and is frequently referred to as the most important government body outside of Washington. You will not see big changes here. Look to what the PUC is doing much more than the EPA or possibly the DOE. Here's the other reason why. After 100 years of living in a carbon-dominated world, most all of my life, our lives, the 10 biggest companies in the world were the 6 oil companies, the 3 auto companies, and either U.S. Steel or General Electric. That's all changing. It's all tech companies now. Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft. That populates the top 10. But what happened here, and what I want you to get a grasp on, solar in 2016 doubled. It's going to continue to go up for the simple reason that costs are going down dramatically. There is no turning back on this issue. And please note, China, the largest solar provider in the world, will triple their capacity by 2020. It is moving to a sustainable world. These slides are now almost 24 months old. If I showed you the newest ones, as costs go down, revenues go up, companies are going public in all of these spaces. It does not matter whether there's a Democrat or Republican as president. It has no impact. Companies in every one of these spaces are taking off. This is the new future. And I want you to see these two slides. If you make a mental note of anything, it is this. Top left, the reddish line is wind, slowly coming down to parity with carbon fuels. But look what's happening with solar. This gets up to the end of 2015. By 2017, you will see for the first time the cost of solar per kilowatt go below carbon-based fuels for the first time. Full stop. Natural gas prices go up and down. They just do, and it's hard to predict. Same with oil. Solar goes only one direction, and that is down, and it will continue to go down for the rest of our lives. We're moving towards a solar world. This has nothing to do with politics. This has only to do with market economics. Here's what I really want you to focus on. Solar, wind are extraordinary because costs are going down, production is going up. In every corner of the planet, there's just one small missing piece: power storage, because they're intermittent technologies. But if you look at power storage, this is the cost curve down. Most of our lives, it was about $2,000 a kilowatt hour. In simple terms, folks, that's way the heck too expensive. It is what is called out of the money. It doesn't help. But look at the cost curve down. And what I want you to note, this year, it's going there. So this is the steady trend each year going down, and if you can Google this, about 8 to 12% a year until this year, where it dropped over 50%. Why is that? It has to do with this. Who knows what this is? It's the Googleplex, 20 miles outside of Reno. In fact, it is the only thing 20 miles outside of Reno. This will be the second largest building in the United States. You all know how big a Costco is, about 100,000 square feet. This will be the size of 100 Costcos put together. It is in operation today. It is not fully built out, but it is in operation about the 10th the current size. It is putting out batteries today. And the punchline here is there is a global race between Tesla, LG Chem, Panasonic, Sanyo that is driving the cost down. What this means is our country, every country, will be an electric vehicle sooner than you know. What this means is as you get down to $200 a kilowatt hour, you will see storage in virtually every house in the United States over the next 10 years. We're moving from a carbon oil economy to a renewable economy, and this is a key part of it. Just as much as every one of you more or less knows what a barrel of oil costs, in the future, your kids will know what the kilowatt per hour cost of storage is. It's being driven by a political push around the world. 191 out of 196 countries sign on to Paris. It is being driven by costs coming down, but I will tell you what drives it more than anything is this. Millennial buyers, completely different than their parents, who largely wanted the biggest TV, the biggest car, the biggest house possible, then to throw it out and buy yet a bigger one. Millennials want three things: a smaller carbon footprint in everything they do. They want complete connectivity with work, home, and their cars all the time. And they want cleaner air, food, and water. This is what's remaking the global economy. This is what the ULI needs to be thinking about in terms of buildings in the future, because the millennial generation, now the largest buying cohort in the world, will demand it. These are the areas where you will see most of the action: energy, utilities, transportation, smart buildings, and increasingly water. And I want to pose on this slide, and then I'll tie up. People say, Steve, I've heard the waves are coming and there's more talk about solar, but when are these firms going to make money? Folks, wake up. It's happening. If you're an investor, there's already 12 billion-dollar companies in this resource efficiency space, and an increasing number of these firms are worth tens of billions. Every firm here is less than 10 years old, and they are rapidly becoming some of the biggest companies on the planet. This is not only one of the best things for the planet, it's one of the most lucrative things on the planet, and I want to challenge you to participate in this new future. Let me just stop with this slide. It's one of my favorites. On the coins in Spain in the 15th century, on every coin it said ni plus ultra. There is no more beyond. And if you went out the Straits of Gibraltar, you might just fall off the edge. There was nothing else out there. All of the known knowledge was in Europe and the Mideast and so on. And then, Da Gama, Magellan, Columbus, one after another, the explorers of the New World come back and say everything we had been taught was wrong. I'm here to tell you that the things I was taught in college at Stanford University, that there is no economic growth without commensurate use of oil in any economy on the planet, is false. I'm here to tell you that there is an entire new world of sustainability and resource efficiency out there. I'm here to tell you that this dictum, that these are lovely things, but they cost too much, and they're never going to be more than 1 or 2% of the global economy, is false. This is the new world. We need to embrace it sooner rather than later. Whether your thing is energy or buildings, this is what's changing the world. I hope you'll be an explorer in this new effort. Thank you. I am delighted to be here. I went a little bit over it. We're going to take a few questions in rapid order. We're going to start with this gentleman here, and if 2 or 3 others are ready, I'll answer your questions as quickly as we can, and then we have some great speakers behind me. Sir.
Thank you. A lot of city planners here. In terms of autonomous cars, what specific things should they be doing to prepare for autonomous cars? What specific details should they be incorporating into their plans?
Good God. So city planners, city managers, by the way, I used to work for the city of San Jose. There is no more important job than working for a city because, folks, the federal government and the state is always the last to get there. Cities are on the cutting edge. The technologies are coming faster than you know. What people really want to know is, A, can you help ensure safety and basic standards? B, can you help ensure equality, equal access? I was talking with the city manager of Santa Monica about how important it is to ensure that disabled and that everybody is assured equal access and safety. Those are the big issues. We're just looking for common standards that can be universal. But please note, everybody is looking for California to lead. We are where most of this is happening. It is no coincidence that places like Tesla happen here. By the way, one of those other things I heard my whole life is, California is nice, but you're never going to manufacture stuff here. I joined the board of Tesla when there were 27 people in a little warehouse in San Carlos, and Elon Musk said, we will challenge Detroit as the car manufacturer of the world, and California will. But we have to set the standards that goes with it. I'm working on an op-ed on this piece now. The smartest guy I've seen in the country is named Stefan Heck. He co-authored a book called Resource Efficiency, The Resource Revolution. If you haven't read it, get it. He'll give you some more specifics on this issue. Let me try to knock out 2 or 3 more other questions. Yes? 5 questions. Good. As long as they're good questions. Sir.
Thank you, Steve. Besides the security challenge, what about the challenge between the haves and have-nots? Most of the people in this room can afford solar, can afford an electric car, but what about our friends who are in multi-unit housing, who are getting by on the bare minimum? How do we bring them along and ensure equity in this?
3 points on this. Huge issue. How do you assure that this isn't just sort of the playground of the rich? And look, God knows I am as guilty of this as anyone. With Tesla, I love the Tesla cars, but at $100,000, it's not solving the problem. It is a plaything. This is going to change because the costs are going down for electric vehicles, for solar, every part. It will become more accessible. 2, cities and states have a responsibility to provide some level of incentives to make sure that those who can't afford the upfront costs, et cetera, have access to these new technologies. Again, Mr. Musk providing Solar City, where you can literally put solar on your roof. And you have to get your arms around this. Literally for 20 years, people would say, I have a solar company, it's awesome. I used to work at the Department of Energy. What's the payback? And as long as it was 10 years, not so much interest. 7 really excludes people. 3, kind of get to a few people in Santa Monica and Beverly Hills. Mr. Musk's big epiphany was not the solar at Solar City. It's that he said, here's the funding vehicle where you can have solar on your roof now, nothing down. So we're trying to make it available. But there's one other really important thing. Full stop. With all of the silliness of the elective season, with one of the candidates saying the problem in the economy that's stealing your jobs, or Mexicans or Muslims, that has nothing to do with why people are losing their jobs. People are losing their jobs because of technology. There's an upside, there's a downside, but one thing I promise, no one in Washington or anywhere else is putting technology back in the bottle. And the one thing that policymakers most need to do, and that was most missing in the presidential election, is how are we as a country going to get better at retraining our workforce, because we're going to need to retool our workers not once in a career, but every 10 and then every 5 years. There are 3.6 million people in this country that drive delivery trucks, taxis, long-haul trucks. Those jobs are going away sooner rather than later. That will be the cutting-edge public policy issue, is how can we, and when I say we, I really mean California, create the new curriculum of the future and think about smart ways to provide later in life job retraining for our workforce, because many of the jobs today will be obsoleted. We need to make sure those people, especially in the underclasses, are retrained so they can be competitive in the future. 2 other questions. Sir.
Where are these cost reductions coming from? Is it purely from economies of scale? And if so, how do startups compete with a company like Tesla that can gain massive economies of scale?
Great question. The economies are coming purely from economies of scale and mass production. Second, you can't compete. No. Let's rewind. I used to sit on the board at Tesla in the early days. And as you may recall, in the early days, like 8 years ago, and we're all sitting there, and there's A123 and this new battery technology, and people from Caltech and MIT, and I saw literally a parade of the smartest people in the world, and they all said they had the breakthrough battery technology. We're still waiting. I'm sure someday it will come, but right now it's about driving the cost down. Here's the next part of the story. We're sitting there at Tesla saying we got to buy more of these batteries, 18650s, the same things in your cell phone and your PC, the same. And we would say, okay, we've got to go line up with Panasonic, Sanyo, LG Chem. And we did. And they said, you can go outside and around the block, and the end of the line is like a ways away, because all we care about is HP. They buy a lot of They buy a lot of our stuff. Apple, they buy a lot. Acer, Gateway. Tesla? Get in line. We'll call you if we have any left over. Now, Tesla buys more 18650s than any computer manufacturer in the world times 2. This is why Mr. Musk had sort of a life-death moment saying, we can't be dependent on Asian manufacturers. By the way, they were all Asian manufacturers 10 years ago. We've got to make our own. Hence, building, always one to think big, the second largest building in the United States, roughly the size of Boeing's entire production facility. It is hard to compete with that. The good news is at least one of the that's now resides in the United States, and it's even better if you're a landholder in the Reno area. 2 more questions. The woman right here with your arm up.
So my question is, the thing that the federal government can affect is their investment in research and development, especially at the university level and that stage of research that we don't see a lot of investment from other places. And so if the federal government can check that and take that away to some extent, who can fill in those types of spaces? For the basic research that we need to advance technology, 5, 10 years from now.
So how can we do more basic research, or how can we spread it around a little better? Yeah. Well, so wish more people like you had voted in November. We sort of. So the woman makes an articulate case for more R&D funding. Folks, I taught at the faculty at Stanford University, and I will be the first to tell you some of these things that sound incredibly archaic, and people love to stand up and say, oh my God, it's the elites, and there's too much money to these places. It translates into progress for all of them. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. I'm really good friends with a guy named Bill Perry. Many of you won't know him. He was a dusty old professor at Stanford in engineering systems until he became Secretary of Defense with 1 million employees and $1 trillion budget. Nearly. And he said he was sitting there in the Clinton administration, and they had to do cuts, because every 3 or 4 years you got to do cuts, and he had all these things to cut and all these packages, and he just had to sign his name because he had to get the budget down, and one of them said basically GPS. But no one knew what GPS was. And he literally said, I've studied a bit. I'm going to go out to New Mexico and see this thing. And he literally got in a helicopter with the front window blacked out. You could see nothing. And they only had a couple of satellites then. So if you went off a very narrow path, the helicopter was not going to be going anywhere you wanted it to go. And he went on the first sort of self-guided, autonomous flight 20 years ago and said, we will not cut this. The economic impact on the United States from R&D is dramatic. We need a president and a Congress who understand that. If this president doesn't get it, we need members in Congress in both parties to stand up and say, if you talk to McKinsey or anybody else, forget Democrats or Republicans, they will tell you that right after basic infrastructure, the best investment we can make is in R&D in this country. We need more of it, not less. Last question. Sir.
Thanks for all your work. This conference started off with a bold challenge by former Congressman Levine to all of us. And I'm heartened by hearing what you have to say. On Sunday, in the midst of everything that happened this week, Boris Clinton said that Lincoln said, we need to remember where we came from in order to know where we're going. And how do we communicate to others outside of our little, universe here? How do you communicate what your message is to drive policy while things are going on?
Well, in short, the question is, how do you fix this political mess we're in? I was hoping for some harder questions this morning, but let's just solve that one right now. It is not easy. By the way, Mel Levine is one of my favorite people and just an extraordinary human being. If we had another 100 Mel Levines, this whole country would be a better place. Let me just come back here. I happen to be a Democrat, and as much as I'm not happy with the outcome of the election, I will be the first to say our party needs to do a better job of getting into the 21st century. We need to talk in a more coherent way about dealing with the have and have-nots. We need to do a better job of talking about the curriculum of the future, universal bandwidth, the things that would give every child a chance in our community to excel. Here's one other thing to just file away, and this is far more controversial than anything I will say. If we could get better about accountability in public education, we could close the gap between blacks and whites, poor and rich, faster than you know, and we don't have nearly enough accountability in our public schools. We don't have high enough standards, and we don't have enough money. But you can't get more money in public education without more accountability. The future is to take a page from the playbook of places like Singapore, South Korea, Finland, and figure out how to retool our public education system for students as well as grown-ups. And let me just close on this point. It is hard to imagine how we're going to succeed in this new world where you literally may have to get completely job retrained, not once a life, but every 10 years, maybe every 5. But I will tell you this flat out. There is no country on the world better prepared to re-educate its population than the United States, the tech center of the world, the wealthiest country of the world. We just need better elected officials who will stand up and do the right thing, not pander to the lowest common elements. Thank you.